Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Hadley Vlahos is the author of the best-selling book, The In-Between: Unforgettable Encounters During Life's Final Moments. Hadley, who is, by the way, a TikTok phenomenon, is a hospice registered nurse, mother, and wife. Her husband also works in the medical field as a doctor of physical therapy. Vlahos started her career as a registered nurse at 22. As a hospice nurse, she now visits people at their home while also educating and sharing stories about hospice care on social media, where she has more than 1 million followers. By the way, I don't know why this is coming out so late, but I remember interviewing Hadley from my kids' school as they were graduating, and I hid in one of the rooms in the school and hoped nobody would find me. So if the sound is a little bit off, that's why, but I had to fit it all in that day. Welcome, Hadley. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your book has changed the way I think about life and death, as I'm sure it has for so many people. Why don't you tell listeners a bit about the book in general and why you decided to take your experiences as a hospice nurse and all these end-of-life moments that you got to experience, why turn them into a book, and when did you even decide to do that? And let's start there.
Yeah, thank you. So my book is 12 patient stories as my time as a hospice nurse that changed my life, changed how I viewed the afterlife, possibility of an afterlife, and just, really made me into the very happy, excited to wake up every day person that I am. And I also share my own story, going from a very young single mom with no plans and no direction to a very confident nurse that feels, like I said, excited to wake up every morning. So that's my book. And about 3 years ago, I randomly went viral on TikTok, just saying that I was a nurse, and people started asking me what kind of nurse I was. And I was very hesitant to share that because hospice is, so taboo. But I finally made a video and said, you know what? I've been a hospice nurse for many years now, and I think I have really cool stories. Does anyone want to hear them? And so many people said, yes, please. Like, I had a loved one on hospice. I want to hear these, please. I feel like I don't have anyone to talk to. And so I started sharing my stories. And the first time that I was like, maybe I should write a book was this direct message I got from someone who said that her husband was on hospice in the hospital, very quick thing. And she felt very alone while, the doctors and nurses rushed in and out trying to do everything they could. And she sat there and she said she watched all of my videos and felt prepared and like she could handle it. And she said, you were there with me almost like I am as a hospice nurse, even though you don't know me. And I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And my thought was, I can only do so much in a 60-second video. And for people like that, or people who've lost a loved one, I would like to go a little bit more in depth into these stories so people really, really get it. And that's how it all started, which I think is so cool.
Oh my gosh. That image of somebody sitting in a hospital and just watching your TikToks and feeling better, that's amazing. I mean, of course, the book too, but just the power of technology now.
Absolutely. And you don't think of it that way. I was just sharing stories. I had no idea social media could have that kind of impact.
So one of the things that has really stayed with me and that was so powerful was talking about how for everybody who dies and how this is a standard thing that all the doctors told you that like, oh yeah, no big deal, was that your loved ones come back for you and that you see them before you die. And it is not a hallucination. And you are very careful to describe the differences, and you share your own work, like even analyzing the medical files of the one patient who, when you first Miss Ward or whatever her name was, I think Miss Ward. Anyway, that for all of us and for every single person, regardless of religion or belief, you are visited by loved ones right at the end. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most amazing things. And I never learned that in nursing school. It's just one of those things that once you get into the profession, everyone just says, like, yes, this is something that happens. And usually what'll happen is when I enter a home, the spouse or the caregiver will say, they've been talking to someone who's been dead a long time. Like, are they okay? And I'll explain, yes, that happens. And there's always so much peace. They're never scared. They have this sense of peace about them that I think is so beautiful. And I'll say, like, are you talking to them? And they'll talk to them just like there's another person in the room that I just can't see. They'll talk to them and then they'll talk to me, which is why I call it the in between. I feel like I'm with people when they're between that world and ours, which is so cool.
So what do you take away from that? I know you said even in the afterword of the book how, you are just convinced that there is something else there. You don't know what, obviously, but you are completely convinced. Like, what does this mean to you, and how has it changed your own view of death?
Yeah, to me, it means that it's not a forever goodbye for me. So it really has changed the way that I see death. Instead of seeing death as this final moment or this failure, it's like a see you later, which is one of my favorite ways to put it. I love to say that this is not the end. I really do believe that there is something after this world. And it is because so many patients with so many different backgrounds all see the same thing. If it was all one religion, I would say, okay, that's that religion and that's what they believe. But it's atheists, it's Christians, it's any religion you can think of.
So what do we think is next?
I don't know. And that was something that I really had a hard time with. And, I discuss in the book where I was like very black and white, thinking like either this is the answer or there's nothing. And I have come to terms with the fact that it's okay for me to not have all the answers and just say, I am convinced that there is something next. And one day I'll find out. Well, I'll find out.
If only we could share the information. You also talk about how at the end of life, there's something called an energy burst, and how you saw this practice with the man that you visited, who you talked about sports with for so long, and who obviously, Carl, thank you. Sorry. Tell me about that and how you found him like running around the house one time.
That was crazy. So he was in the bed bound is what we call it, for about a year, just no energy to get up or do anything. And I walked into his bedroom one day, like I always do, and the bed was empty. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, he's died. No one told me. Oh my gosh, the funeral home's already come and got him. And then a minute later, I have a flashlight in my face. And I say in the book, I was like, it's not the bright light that everyone talks about. No one sees that. It was a flashlight in his hand. And he's walking around and crouching down and looking under the bed, playing hide and seek with one of his deceased loved ones. And his wife is right behind him, making sure if he fell that she could catch him. And I was like, what is going on to her? And she was like, I thought that you were going to tell me what was going on. And I'm like, this is insane. And people they get this surge of energy that's just incredible. And one of the reasons why I really thought it was important to include that in multiple different stories is that a lot of times families will see this and think, my loved one is doing better. They're going to recover, they're going to do well, and they're going to come off hospice. And they need to know that this is something that can happen right before people die, to savor that moment and to really say, okay, this might be what this is. Let me really stop everything else I'm doing and take this moment and really enjoy it.
That story in particular, like, brought tears to my eyes when he said he was playing hide and seek. Because Lost child. Oh my gosh. The emotional moments that you witness and the gift of being part of these just tender, poignant, amazing moments is so special. And the fact that you get to share them with the rest of us. And now all of us get these inside glimpses. It's like otherworldly. It's amazing. So amazing.
I agree. I love it. I love my job so much.
You also share in the book about your experience having a baby at 19 and having a total sort of life redirection moment and how that has affected your life and how you've since gone on to have two more kids and fall in love and all sorts of wonderful things. Take me back more to that time in your life and what it was like having a baby then and even your pregnancy when you were at home again and all that. Just take me back there.
Yeah, that was very, very, very difficult. That was the most difficult time period of my life, getting pregnant at 19. And then, as I discussed in the book, deciding to keep my son. And, my world got very small. A lot of people did not want to be around that or be associated with that. And, all these people that were always so supportive of me all of a sudden just disappeared. And it was really, really difficult when I needed support the most. And that was so difficult for me. I'm very glad that I made the decision to go into nursing school with the goal that it would, in a couple of years, provide a very stable income for myself and my son. And I feel like it was my calling. I feel like this was where I'm meant to be. And I feel like I needed that redirection. And that was such a difficult time in my life. But now I think that it was all worth it and, put me where I'm supposed to be.
Wow. How old are all the kids now?
So Brody, who I had when I was young, he's 10. And then we have a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old.
Oh my gosh. And you have a book coming out? How are you doing? And your job? Tell me how you're balancing life right now. Like, what was the morning like for you?
It's chaotic. Thankfully, I have a very supportive partner. And I always say that now because, when I was a single mom, I didn't. And that was a lot more difficult, right? My husband right now, he picks up, he probably does 80% of things right now while things are getting so crazy. And I think that makes a big difference. And I think it's important to acknowledge that whenever people are saying, how do you do it? I have a supportive partner, which helps. And yeah, it can be a lot. I call my book my fourth baby. But as you know, publishing can be kind of slow. So it's not like I wrote this in like a month. It's been almost 3 years total. And I work about 2 to 3 days a week right now.
Wow. Has there been anything about the publishing journey and having the book actually come out and all of that has been unexpected for you or particularly fun or particularly not fun?
Yeah, all of it's been very crazy. I just, I guess the craziest part for me is that you check your email and you just like never know what's going to be in there. And it's so strange. And you won't hear from people for like 2 to 3 days. And then one day they're like, oh, you're this picked for this list and you're this and that. And congratulations. And here's your pre-orders. And then it's like, oh, let's get some champagne, and then the other day it's just nothing. It's kind of strange.
That's amazing. I love it. Tell me where you want to take your whole thing. You have this book coming out, your whole career, your life. You're in this really, unique spot with your connections to the materials of life and death and loss and all of that. And now in publishing and TikTok and all of that. So when you were laying in bed at night, like where do you fantasize about this all going? Or have you just reached where it's going?
Yeah, no, I want to open a nonprofit. I'm actually already taking steps to open a nonprofit hospice house. I really see a big gap in care with hospice houses, which can provide care for like up to 5 days for people who need a break without having to like permanently move to a nursing home. So just if the caregivers need a break. Right now, at least in my area near New Orleans, we don't have one that allows caregivers to stay. And unfortunately, when most people need the most help is near the end of life, after they've been caring for them for a while and symptoms are getting a little bit harder to control. And many caregivers will not risk not being there when their loved one dies. So they will just completely be burned out. They will just refuse the hospice house care So I'm trying to open up a hospice house where not only are the caregivers welcome, but they're taken care of as well. They're given an actual break, food, a bed to sleep in, a break. And I hope that I can open one here and then have them all across the US.
That's amazing. I love that. Are you taking donations for that? How are you raising the money and making that happen?
So right now I've applied for the 501(c)(3) through the government to become a nonprofit. Because it's a medical facility, it is taking a little bit longer, which I understand. And then I can start raising money.
Wow, it's really amazing. Have you read, by the way, Catherine Newman's book that takes place in a hospice setting? It's a memoir. We All Want Impossible Things. You have to read it. It's so funny.
I'm gonna write it down. We all want impossible things.
Yeah, Catherine Newman.
I've never even heard of it. I'm gonna read it.
So good. I'll put you two in touch through your public, but it all takes place at a hospice house when her dying.
Oh, I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. Anyway, I recommend that. What was the effect of COVID on you as a nurse in this particular area, and how did you navigate that, and how do you see things now?
Yeah, it's much better now. The most difficult thing starting out was that a lot of healthcare workers, especially our CNAs, left. So we were very short staffed. And then, we had a coworker. So we're really small. I only have like 3 coworkers that are nurses. We had one that was pregnant, totally understood. She went on leave. So now we have one less nurse, which is hard. And then at the same time, the hospital is constantly calling us and saying, hey, this person's ready to go home on hospice. And you knew that if you didn't work overtime and take these patients, then they could potentially die without their family because the hospital wasn't allowing visitors. And that was the difference between someone dying without family or not. And I burned out during COVID. It was very difficult to constantly feel like you can either go to a soccer game or this person's going to die alone. And it seems like an obvious choice, but whenever that's happening 7 days a week, that becomes extremely difficult. So, and for a while I thought that there was no end in sight. But thankfully, it is much, 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 much better now.
Oh my gosh. All the stuff you've been through. You're like an angel.
Oh, thank you.
Speaking of nurses, you write about in the book that there is this, perhaps not even unspoken, but unbeknownst to the lay people, rivalry, if you will, or lack of care or competition, I don't even know, from the older nurses to the younger nurses. It was like a hazing situation.
Yeah, they say nurses eat their young. That's a pretty common phrase. And I don't really know why it happens, but I was warned of it in nursing school. I saw it in nursing school where the older nurses almost like a hazing, like you said. I do think it's getting better because the ones that were hazed are not doing it. And, now that I've been a nurse for 8 years now. So, all of us who were put through that are not doing it. So I do think it is getting better. But yeah, that was very difficult. They'll roll your eyes if you have to be with them for the day, or they'll say, oh, I hate it when they put, these new nurses with me. They slow me down. And it was rough.
Oh my gosh. As you think of that, so counterintuitive because nurses seem like caring people by trade. But anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see it sometimes. There's the nursing shortage. And I'll see my friends on TikTok sometimes and they'll be like, oh, nursing's the worst. Nursing's horrible. And then they're like, there's such a bad nursing shortage. And I'm like, well, you can probably talk about the positives, not necessarily encouraging anyone to come join nursing.
It's some publicity rehabilitation here.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you find any time to read yourself? And if so, what do you like to read?
Yeah, between patients, I see rural patients right now, which I just love. So they're over an hour away from my house. So I can listen to audiobooks all the time. Right now I'm listening to Yellowface. I love it so far. It is so good.
I have to read that.
You'll love it. You will love it. It's really, really good. And then occasionally I'll listen to nonfiction, just kind of what I'm in the mood for.
Okay, that's my plan. I have that podcast coming up, but I maybe I need to skip the line and start Yellowface early.
Oh, you will. It's really good.
Okay.
And it's an unlikable narrator, but usually I don't like those, but this one is really good.
Okay, interesting. What advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Don't give up. I always tell people I queried so many literary agents and I was rejected so many times. So many people said, I just don't think people want to talk about death and dying. I started at the very beginning of COVID queering, and it just, people were like, no, we've had too much of this. We don't want to talk about this. No, thank you. And then finally my agent Noah, did accept it. And then it went to auction at the publishers. So just because someone's telling you no does not affect the outcome of how well your book will do. That's just one person's opinion. And I say that for reviews too. It's just one person's opinion.
Wow. Well, you were very inspiring and a role model in terms of so many things, of consideration and care and sensitivity, empathy. You're obviously, just from reading your book and your sunny disposition here, you're just so giving. And I'm so happy that the universe is giving back to you right now.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, best of luck. And I will be following along and cheering for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.